After all these years of performing reggae, my hearing is still fine, because I could hear that hectic noise. I've actually changed the presentation I'm going to give here today. We had a research program a couple of days ago in which I gave a paper called The Original Venda Hustler, which was about car stickers and such things. So I'm not going to repeat that. I'm going to talk about the book that was recently published that you just heard in the introduction there. And what I do in that book is basically offer a critical ethnographic engagement about HIV/AIDS peer group educators in the former homeland of Venda. Now, this is mostly groups of young women who sing songs about AIDS and try and get people to change their behavior. And one of the main arguments that I make in the book, the kind of overarching arguments, is that policymakers have misunderstood the relationship, probably actually ignored the relationship mostly, between biomedical knowledge, scientific knowledge on one hand, and what you could call folk knowledge or ancestral wisdom or ritual knowledge on the other hand. And there's very different ways that these groups of knowledge get passed on. And that kind of relationship has been almost ignored. And as part of this, by the opposition to, well, it's not in opposition, they're quite related, but the folk model, part of that constructs young women, and this is across sub-Saharan Africa, as carriers of pollution and as potentially carriers of sexual disease. And so that's going to be important at the very end of my presentation. What I want to do is go through three main ethnographic components of the book. Firstly, looking at the role of female initiation. Secondly, at the role of music. And thirdly, poisonings, which are randomly quite important in the story. So looking at female initiation, there's a revival of culture and tradition, ideas of culture and tradition globally at the moment. And this finds quite specific expression in the Venda region in terms of a revival of female initiation schools. The most iconic one in Venda is the Domba, which I see is being drawn on the board just now. That's actually the very final stage of female initiation. And this is something that girls go through as they get to a certain age. They start menstruation, then they go through a certain process. Girls are very dangerous at this stage. They start bleeding. That blood is potentially pollution, and that can cause problems in social reproduction and sexual reproduction. So this is a perfect space to try and have AIDS education. It's a legitimate space for the transferal of ritual knowledge. And against that background, King Kennedy Chivase, who's the king that I kind of work under in Venda, tried to get AIDS education into his initiation schools. And he sent me along to go and record it. And what I found there, after going to several initiation schools, was that the biomedical stuff was getting kicked out. It was like quite violently often removed from the ritual curriculum. And to understand why, you've got to see this notion of a kind of pyramid of ritual knowledge, the elders at the top who know the secret knowledge, and they pass this down to the girls at the bottom who learn, and they become socially responsible characters. But biomedical AIDS education was not known by the elders. They weren't trained in that. And it was the young girls that knew about it, and they tried to put it into the curriculum, but the old women kicked it out quite violently. So what we see here is a problem, because young women are statistically more likely to become HIV positive, so they get the focus of all these interventions. But actually we see a classic example here of why older women should actually be involved in that kind of education. Okay, so initiation, put that to the side. Music. Music fits into this process and the arguments in the book more widely, because the peer educators that I'm talking about made these claims that they sing about what they cannot talk about. And that was quite an interesting thing for me. We can sing about something, but we can't talk about something. And it's related to this notion of knowledge being dangerous. Ritual knowledge is a very dangerous thing. It's sung about in a ritual context. The ritual context, like the initiation, is a safe place to transfer dangerous information. Peer educators use music, not just because it's quite cheap and quite catchy, but to protect themselves against the danger within this knowledge. And so they take different kinds of genres, well-known songs, and they change the lyrics to them slightly. And the idea is that music becomes a kind of a trap. So somebody hears the song and they go, okay, I get that, then they change the lyric. And they're quite shocking in the way that they do it. So one example is they take a gospel song called Jesus is Number One, and they change it to Condom is Number One. right? And that's quite shocking, and they want to shock people with it. They take struggle songs, a whole array of struggle songs. There were some wonderful struggle songs today, by the way, outside the main gate. Don't know if anybody saw the protest. But there was various struggle songs that I could recognize from the peer educators' repertoire. Nobody owns these songs. They're up for grabs. You can take them and use them for whatever you want. And so the peer educators have taken one song, a very well-known one about Joe Modise. So it goes, maybe I'll sing it for you. It goes, Tate Modise, yo, Modise, we, yo. Anybody know it? Right? You recognize it? Okay. From your struggle credentials. Peer educators take that and they go, condom undi boso, ndi bo, endi boso, endi boso. Right, so they take Joe Modise, condom is the boss, okay? And they take these different elements of stuff and they kind of build this bricolage. They take struggle credentials, Christian credentials, tradition, their own ideas, and they try and create this safe environment to transfer their dangerous knowledge. Okay, that's music. Put that to one side. Poisonings. When I went to Venda for the first time in 1995, somebody told me if a vendor it wants to kill you, they won't shoot you, they'll poison you very slowly. Right? Now, I'm not into ethnic essentialisms, a vendor doing such a thing, but this turned out to be quite true. There's lots and lots of poisonings that go on in Venda. It's really common, but nobody ever knows who's doing it or where it comes from. It's rumor, it's gossip. And when I was doing this research, there was a spate of poisonings called 7 days poisoning. You take the poison, you die after 7 days. Very inventively named. But everyone was paranoid about this. It was huge news. Everybody knew about it, and everyone was scared of it, but nobody spoke about it in public. It was all gossip and rumor in the background. So this was ethnographically interesting. So I started looking at it and trying to work out, why is this? And it's about the relationship between knowledge and experience. If you've got public knowledge of this poisoning, then somebody's going to say, well, how do you know? You might somehow be implicated in passing it around. So people keep quiet about it, but they gossip about it. And it's the very same principle that stops people speaking openly about HIV and AIDS. Right, this notion that there's an AIDS denialism, people don't speak about AIDS, they're in denial of it, that's to a large extent a lot of rubbish. A lot of people don't speak about AIDS because it's a form of unnatural death. Knowing about causes of unnatural death might implicate you in that cause, right? So, people didn't speak about poisonings for the same reason as people don't speak about AIDS in public, different situation in private. So if you take these things all together, there's a group of young women doing this peer education. They're already somehow involved in ideas about pollution. They're dangerous characters, but they've been targeted for this AIDS education because statistically they're more likely to become infected. Add on to that this notion in which they are telling everybody that they are the experts in biomedical knowledge, which is also, to some extent, ritual knowledge. They're trying to pass this information on. They're using music as a way to try and make things safe, but it doesn't work because it's not in a ritual context. In fact, it backfires on them, so this knowledge of AIDS that they have comes right back on them, and they become socially constructed as vectors of the virus, as the ones who are involved in actually passing it around. So things like condoms that the peer educators give out all the time start to become associated not with preventing HIV, but actually with the transmission of HIV. And this is a cultural logic. It's not some madness that you see in the Daily Sun headline. This is actually, a lot of people actually think this, and it makes sense in this context. So, to conclude, peer educators get a lot of money for it. There's a lot of money put into it. The NGO world is, as we all know, a way in which people are trying to make money these days, and quite successfully so. But unless African worldviews like this are taken seriously, and unless people engage with these quite complicated relationships about knowledge and experience, ritual knowledge and biomedical knowledge, and try and work out how different things are transferred, and ignore the unintended consequences of that, then policy will always be a step behind. And this, just lastly, is also really important for antiretrovirals. The prevention stuff is almost old hat now. People say, well, ARVs work. ARVs work now, so what's the point? Everyone can just take ARVs. Right? Then you can live a long, healthy life. But ARVs are hugely powerful things. They take people from death to life. It's a hugely powerful thing that these things do. And ARVs are being constructed in this ritual knowledge paradigm in a very different way that they're constructed in a so-called biomedical scientific way. And unless future research focuses on the ways in which ARVs are constructed in this different context, then policymakers are going to miss the boat. And that's 10 minutes. Thank you.